Can you guys hear me? Sorry, hold on.
32 SuperFans.
I couldn't understand a word they were saying.
One PodVader.
You fired up for that, man? Huh?
Every angle of the NFL covered.
We on go time. We still on go.
This is Next Fan Up.
We're live, bro.
All right, Next Fan Up fans. I'm James, your Eagles super fan, here with Nick, our Chiefs super fan. The final score of Super Bowl 55, Chiefs 9, Buccaneers 31. Tom Brady wins his 7th Super Bowl. And if I sound a little bit disdained in saying that sentence, it's because a little bit of vomit came up in my mouth just saying it. Yes, I was biased in this. It was pretty much, by all accounts, more one-sided than anyone would have foreseen. Nick, overall thoughts on the game before we get back into it from beginning to end?
Oh, man. Good Lord. Where to start? Look, I mean, on the high level, the better team won. I mean, the teams that took the field on this particular Sunday, the better team absolutely won. And I have a lot of nitpicks and complaints here and there, but there's no doubt in my mind that you play these two squads against each other. I think the Bucs win the majority of those, whether it's 10 or 20, whatever, however many times you shake up that boggle ball of dice. And what it really came down to is, and it's almost a shame, I think, that, when we were previewing this matchup, Pod asked me, like, what are the matchups you're interested in? And I said, like, basically everything comes down to the weakness of the Chiefs O-line playing 4 out of 5 as backups. And in some cases, like, dipping more than, like, one step behind the starter. And versus a very good front four defense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and whether or not the Chiefs were going to be able to scheme up something to counter that weakness against its strength. And the answer to that, really from the get-go, was no. And that was really, I think, like the central story of the entire game, because I mean, the Chiefs defense also broke down against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, but it also early on had its successes. And I think if the Chiefs offense had just been able to find its footing and to really play the way that it normally plays in this game, none of the rest of it would have mattered. Like the fact, usually the Chiefs defense is used to playing with a lead, or at least being in a shootout situation where it can, pin its ears back against the pass on third down every single time. It doesn't have to really deal with a dual threat sort of situation where a team can run it, as effectively as it can pass it. And so the Chiefs just found themselves in the situation they had not found themselves in basically for almost 2 years, because nothing in the playbook works if you can't keep Mahomes clean.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what it all came down to.
Yeah. And this game pretty much turned at the end of the first quarter. And to your point, third down was pretty much the bugaboo for the Chiefs. And, once they got down double digits, it was unleash the dogs. That ultimately, that was the matchup that determined this game, your O-line versus the Bucs D-line. Mahomes just didn't – at times I couldn't tell if I was watching your offense, no disrespect to Justin, our Seahawks fan, or watching their offense. A lot of the pressures on Mahomes looked like jailbreaks. It didn't look like anybody got a hand on the man in front of them. And these were all 4-man pressures. I don't think the Buccaneers blitzed at all tonight. It was Sue and Vea and JPP and Shaq Barrett just taking the turns, beating the man in front of them, wherever they had one-on-one coverage, they just beat it. And ultimately, like you said, the pressure on the outside just collapsed almost everything. Plays are broken down. The Buccaneers were determined that they were going to drop 7 and just, let the front four get after Mahomes. And that seemed to be the plan once they got settled in after the first quarter, because, again, it was only 7-3 after one. And, I know anybody has to be feeling good about their team one way or the other as far as the chances of winning the games. You got Brady on, one first down and then punting 3 plays later on the first or second drive of the game. You're feeling pretty good. Like, all right, maybe things are working in our favor. But that second quarter, that second quarter is pretty much where all the breakdowns happen. Like any and everything. It was Murphy's Law. Anything that could go wrong did go wrong. A number of penalties on the defense, some of which were questionable. But like you said, the better team did win. And I want to focus on that, really, that second quarter where basically, for lack of a better term, the wheels basically fell off in that second quarter. They got the run game going. Your offense only was able to get 3 more points out of that quarter. There were missed opportunities, a lot of contested catches, some easily dropped balls, but maybe 3 or 4 total. But there were uncharacteristic drops by both Kelsey and Tyreek Hill when they had their opportunities there in that second quarter. Speak to that second quarter, because I feel like that's what the game ultimately turned going into halftime.
Yeah, because I think that was the period of time where the Chiefs still had the opportunity to be the Chiefs. Like, everything had gone against them to that point. There had been a lot of mistakes on their side of the ball, and things had not gone their way, but we've seen this story before. But I don't know. There was something about that. I don't know whether it was 3rd or 4th down throw where, Mahomes threw like an insane off-platform ball while being sacked, hit Kelsey in the hands. And granted, it would have been a difficult catch, but for Kelsey, it's the sort of thing you kind of expect. He had a guy wrapped around him, couldn't pull it in. It's a punt. And also, by the way, the punting was terrible in this game for the Chiefs side. And, it's not a thing that I normally have to talk about as a Chiefs fan, but, good Lord, we cut our longtime punter last season. We have a rookie punter who, generally doesn't get a whole lot of play in games, but, it's just sort of weird to bring up in the freaking Super Bowl. But I don't even know what his average ended up being, but it must have been in the 30s. He shanked a couple of punts, knocked a few in that should have been easy, inside of 10 guys that ended up as touchbacks. And that was part of the whole problem, right? Because the Chiefs were moving the ball a little bit, but not enough. And so they were settling for punts that they, okay, we're going to play field position. Problem is, they were, getting a few first downs and then punting it, and then they were terrible punts, and the Buccaneers were scoring on every single one of the receiving drives. And I think there's going to be a lot of interesting analysis going back, especially in that first half. And it's easy to say in hindsight the Chiefs should have gone for all of those. But that's kind of how it goes. But especially just seeing when they were net punting 20, 30 yards and the Bucs were scoring touchdowns on every single one of those drives, I don't care where you are on the field, just fucking take one of those. Sorry to create a bleep situation there that
to clean it up later.
Pod is going to have to clean up. But yeah, that's the situation where the Chiefs were in, and the Chiefs were in that situation that they're not used to finding themselves in, where the offense can't get it going. And when the defense is not scared, the defense is in a situation where they're defending an offense that isn't scared of them, where they're not up, by a score or two, and therefore have the full complement of their playbooks available to them. And yeah, I went into the half hopeful that the Chiefs could turn it around, because, I mean, it was a multiple score deficit, but the Chiefs got the ball to start the second half. So usually in those situations, at the very least, the Chiefs can go on a run. It can happen. They can do it. But well, you can set up the second half.
Yeah. So come out the second half, your first possession, field goal. And that was pretty much it for the rest of the way. Tampa Bay takes their next possession, goes down, score a touchdown. It's 28-9. I know the panic from, Chiefs Nation is setting in our Slack channel where, tongue in cheek, we're saying you got them right where you want them. This is where they turn. This is where they come back. It never really happens because, again, and, to beat a dead horse, the O-line never really found any rhythm in this game. Protection was virtually non-existent. And, at that point, the Buccaneers D-line knew you were going to have to pass the majority of plays just to get back into it. Yeah, there was some runs in there. Edwards-Helaire got off a couple of, 10, 12-yard runs, ended up with 64 yards on 9 carries. But those are just plays where they were expecting to pass and you caught them off guard all coming up the field. So he was able to get past the second level of the defense and into the secondary. But it just never really seemed like adjustments were truly made by Reed and the offensive staff to try to compensate for the pressure that the O-line was getting. I don't know if they thought that things were going to materialize downfield before pressure got to Mahomes or what, but scheme-wise, it didn't look like anything changed at the halves. Give me your insight there, because I'm looking at the game from an outsider's perspective, not really having a dog in this fight, but it just looked like more of what they tried to do in the first half. Like, this is our game plan and we're sticking to it. And didn't look like many adjustments were made.
I can see that. I personally don't put it on Reed or Mahomes. I just don't think there was any other path out of this thing. I mean, because, it's one thing if you have a healthy O-line and you can say that, well, look, they've been covering up the usual routes we do on the passing game or whatever. They're covering that up, so let's just run it on them or something like that. But it's not like the Chiefs' all backup O-line was good in the pass game, or was bad in the pass game but good in the run game. They were bad at everything. And so the only thing they had was they had a few runs in their pockets, which were like good schemed up runs where they could just move enough stuff around that they could break, Clyde Edwards-Helaire for 9 yards occasionally. But there's only so many of those you have where the scheme itself and all the moving pieces are going to give you the space just to grant you 10 yards. And Reed has a handful of those things in his pocket, but not an unlimited amount of them, especially against a defense that is good and well coached and is learning as you play against them. And so I just think I think the Chiefs honestly just got to a point where there's only so many things you can do when you don't have protection at all. And this was a situation I didn't see the Chiefs getting into, but again, it's one that I don't really blame either Mahomes or Reed for, because it's just, there was just nothing there. And on top of it, I'm not going to whine about officiating, but it just happens to be a fact that the way that the Chiefs play defense is that because they are more comfortable blitzing, part of that comes with they're more comfortable with their defensive backfield, being a little grabby to stick with their guys, because they have to be one-on-one. And different officiating crews are going to call that differently. And the Chiefs got a bad draw in terms of the officiating crew. They were pulling the flags on everything, and I think almost every one of the Bucs scoring drives had at least one defensive penalty on them.
Absolutely, it did.
And as Tony Romo and the officiating crew mentioned, on any offensive drive where you have a defensive penalty, your chance of scoring goes up by a huge percentage, and that's what happened. So, and I'm not sure the defense adjusted well enough to that, because the defense they're just going to play the way they play. It is a side of the ball that doesn't have a ton of like pure talent, and they haven't invested a ton into it because they can't, because all their money is obviously locked up in the offense.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to play aggressive, and they have to play kind of on the line of the penalties all the time due to their aggressiveness. And if and if you get a crew that's going to throw the flags on that, and the annoying thing for me, and I'm not again trying to put this on the refs, I'm putting it honestly more on the players, is that like it felt like half of the big flags that the Chiefs defense got were on uncatchable balls. And I think that honestly may just been what Tom Brady was going for. Like he was just simply like, I'm going to sail this ball in the direction of this Chief defender, and I'm sure he's going to tackle my receiver.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, is like one hand has to wash the other. And for the Chiefs, when they were in a rut, in every single one of these situations in the past where they've been able to turn it around, it's both sides igniting at the same time, where the Chiefs start scoring points and the Chiefs defense starts getting stops. But the Chiefs defense was not getting stops in this game. That just didn't happen. And part of that was that they, the usual stuff they did was just getting flagged. So there was no way back. There was no way back to Jerusalem in this particular Super Bowl.
Yeah, and like you said, the better team won today, so all credit to the Buccaneers. Tom Brady pretty much kept clean, was 21-29 for 201 yards, 3 touchdowns, only sacked once. The combination of Fournette and Jones ran for a combined 150 yards, 89 for Fournette, and he had 1 touchdown rushing. Jones, 61 yards rushing. No one in the passing game really set the world on fire, like you said. Gronk was the leading receiver, 6 catches, 67 yards, Brady's first 2 touchdown catches. Antonio Brown gets in the end zone later on. He had 5 for 22 yards and that 1 touchdown. So, and for the most part, Mike Evans held in check, just 1 catch for 31 yards off 1 target. So, I mean, like you said, almost every touchdown the Buccaneers scored was on a short field. But when that's coupled with whether it was turnovers late or the punter of the Chiefs shanking the ball 20 yards out of bounds, ultimately he ended up with 3 punts total in the game for 107 yards. So that's an average of 33, 34 yards a punt. Terrible. Really not helping his team out there on an average basis.
It's terrible both for for him as a punter, and granted, it's you're a rookie in the Super Bowl, but like the special teams and the coaching staff in general has to be aware of that. And as lopsided as this game was, they had to recognize that, like, okay, punting anywhere around midfield, what are we doing here? This game is already out of our hands, so let's at least try to get back in it. I don't care what the final score is, if we're not taking these chances. And there were several of those punting situations that I just didn't agree with. Even some of the kind of crazy ones, because you never know what's going to happen with the Mahomes. But given how bad our punting was, like if we're going to net 30 yards of field position against a team we haven't been able to stop from scoring a touchdown on like 4 straight drives, like what are we doing here? And those are questions for the coaching staff. But I've seen in some of the early reaction of just like, oh, it's a Mahomes choke job or whatever. It's like, well, first of all, this is if it is a Mahomes choke job, if that's who we're gonna lay this wreath of failure around, it is literally his first. This is his first multi-score loss in his career, which almost every quarterback faces in his first year.
True.
And so, okay, we'll have all off season to administer blame,
right?
But, I think there's no way around viewing this as a 3-stage complete failure on the Chiefs.
No, and like you said, look, we have to give credit to the Bucs here. Defensively, they had the game plan. You you set your defensive line up to go after the quarterback, healthy O-line or not. You have to assume that protection is going to hold up more times than not, maybe 55, 60% of the time. But even on the back end, a handful of times they did hold up and give Mahomes protection. Of course, his two biggest targets were double teamed. So there was no, I don't know, maybe in the second half I was looking more for the supporting cast of receivers to step up. Maybe the game plan should have shifted to highlight them, take advantage of their one-on-one matchups. But I don't know. For me, these defenses, the secondaries particularly, both the Chiefs and the Buccaneers, play a similar style. You mentioned the aggressiveness, yet, again, not nitpicking on the officiating. I didn't see much holding penalties or flags going on the Buccaneers secondary because they play the same style. Those corners are very handsy. They're very grabby. Anybody who thinks they're not, please go back and watch the NFC Championship game where they were grabbing the Packers wide receivers all over the place. They played just as aggressive and physical as the Chiefs secondary and got no calls tonight for pass interference or holding or illegal contact. I mean, nothing at all.
Yeah. Wild. And by the way, that goes back to the NFC Championship game, that particular conversation. Right. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it is just one of those things where, like, from an officiating standpoint, you got to be aware. It's like
consistency.
Do I have to be the one that brings the fair and balanced coverage back?
No, we're quite fair and we're quite balanced. We're talking about what we saw here.
Has Pod popped up somewhere out of the gloom?
I mean, I've only been on and listening to this whining and complaining for 10 minutes. It's quite outrageous.
It's been quite fair and balanced. I've given all credit to the Buccaneers and their winning of this game. We've broken down what they've done right on both sides of the ball. They found their balance when they needed to, ran when they had to. It all worked out for them. So,
a couple of things that was just brought up that I would like to address. And
go ahead.
The first is the Mahomes factor. How many times have we seen in the past Mahomes run backwards 50 yards?
Never.
And complete an amazing pass that we're all like, that should never have been completed, but it was. It seemed like all of those times when somebody named PodVader kept saying, he can't keep doing this, but he does. It seems like tonight was the night it came to roost. And I don't know if it was the injury. Romo mentioned he was limping a couple times out there or what it was, but it was just, it was almost like this is the Mahomes that we should have seen when he first started playing the game, not 2 years into his career.
It did happen against, I think it was Miami. He got like a 35-yard sack or something like that. It was like the first time he finally got caught up to there. But I mean, that was the state of the Chiefs offense in a lot of this game, was that everything broke down. And even the short options were covered, or there was JPP with hands into the air. There was nothing for Mahomes to do. And so he goes back to what he does, which is just like run backwards, and it doesn't matter. His arm can cover the distance, but there's still nothing there. and so we saw a lot of these just absolutely insane, ridiculous plays we definitely have not seen in the Super Bowl. And that was just Mahomes just trying to make something out of nothing. And I think he probably got away with at least one intentional grounding that barely crossed the line of scrimmage. But I mean, that was just, it was finally, and unfortunately, Mahomes in his second Super Bowl, he was basically back to his Texas Tech days where he had no team around him other than some decent skill position players. But all he could do was just to run around and try to find a play.
You didn't mention this during your preview, but you've mentioned it numerous times before. And one player who disappeared in this game that is a key to success when Hill and Kelsey are taken out of the game, although Kelsey wasn't really taken out of the game, is Sammy Watkins. Where was Sammy Watkins tonight?
Yeah, I don't know. Sammy's been a little injured. and I do not expect him to be back.
I mean, he did come back for the AFC Championship game for like the first time in 6 weeks. Prior to that, he was missing.
Yeah,
And
I don't think he played though last week.
No, he didn't. He didn't play much in the AFC. He was. I think he was in uniform, but they didn't use him in the AFC Championship. But yeah, we mentioned that, Watkins, Robinson, Hardman, Pringle.
Hardman dropped a couple, or at least had a couple in his neighborhood that he could have probably reeled in. And that was the thing. I mean, it was what's interesting, and the difference between this Chiefs team and the team last year was that I feel like they were able to spread the ball around a little bit better last year, and teams I think wised up to maybe how the secondary options work, and they were able to figure out ways of taking those away. And one way or the other, the Chiefs just figured out ways of finding ways for Kelsey and Hill to improvise on routes, and basically Mahomes and Hill and Kelsey were just on a mind meld, and they would just be like jazz musicians, just trying to find each other in the chaos constantly, and that's who he would go to. And so basically, and he would go to the other guys if that was all covered. But in games like these, I don't know whether it was their own focus or a game plan or what, or just simply the interpersonal relationships that Mahomes didn't go for some of the secondary options as much. But, I mean, you look at it, and there were several targets towards Hardman that Hardman just flubbed, or he seemed to not be still running the full speed on his route and didn't quite catch up to it, or this or that. And it was just the connection isn't there for some of these secondary guys. When
2 catches on 6 targets for Hardman.
Right. When it's really hitting the fan, Mahomes is always going to go to Hill or Kelsey in a tough spot, because those guys have a real mind meld situation. Everybody else, it's hey, they somehow break open. Well, okay, fine. I'll throw it to them. But otherwise, they're not really part of the game plan, it seems like now. And look, that's great for beating the crap out of random teams in the regular season. I think the Chiefs are kind of like the Golden State Warriors in that. They can work their way through most teams there, but against a well-rounded team in the Super Bowl, if you can't figure out a way of getting those secondary guys open and have Mahomes trust them to be able to reel in the ball, I think that may have been, one of the bigger factors in why this offense fell apart.
The other question I have is, where was Le'Veon Bell? I'm not saying that Le'Veon Bell could have been a game changer, but he has been performing during this postseason, has he not?
Bell has been basically performing at the same level as Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think they've always viewed him as being basically a guy they would spell CEH for, drive for drive, and I guess he was a little bit gimpy, and honestly, in the last few games, CEH outplayed him a little bit, so I don't know where he was on the depth chart, but obviously Darrell Williams also got a lot of looks in this game, who's a former UDFA who's just gone up through the system. So I don't think they have a high opinion of Le'Veon Bell, weirdly enough, in the system. But yeah, I mean, I think the Chiefs just ended up in a system where they're already I think the most pass happy team in the league, and on top of it, they fell to a deficit, so they just weren't going to run the ball much anyway.
Bell could have been used in the passing game, even if he did line up at wide receiver, something he has experience doing. I'm surprised that he never saw the field tonight at all in any capacity whatsoever. Just to throw something different out there that the Buccaneers probably wouldn't have been expecting.
I wouldn't have hated it, but it seemed like the Bucs were jumping down on a lot of the Chiefs' screens, and the screen game is a big part of Andy Reid's playbook. And so I think if they thought that was going to work, better, they would have had more of those. But a bunch of those got chomped down on.
I know they're not going to use it, but the Reed accident, do you think that played any sort of distraction at all for these guys in this game? It was mentioned in the third quarter, which I thought was a little odd. The Jim Nantz pause to talk about the family being in their thoughts and prayers. I thought that was strange, especially at the time that he brought it up.
Yeah, I mean, you can't rule it out, and I don't know. Honestly, just as a father, very interested in football, it's been a tough weekend for me. Not only for that, but I've been a longtime fan of the Around the NFL podcast, in which Chris Wessling has been a stalwart in that. And, he passed due to cancer at the very early age of 46 this weekend. I was hit hard by that. And as a father, I just feel for Andy Reid too, who, in his final year at the Eagles, he's had two sons who have had, a lot of trouble with the law and a lot of trouble in their lives. And, one of his sons, we don't know. We don't know what the cause of death was, but died at Eagles training camp, in the year of his final year with the Eagles. And now, almost on the eve of his second Super Bowl, another son is in a multiple car accident, which puts multiple children into hospital, including one in critical. And it's been hard. For me as a father, thinking about not only the parents of those kids, but also of Andy, and it's just he's been trying to do what he can to keep his sons close, by trying to keep them employed close to him and keep an eye on them, and yeah, it's been rough. So that was kind of a long spiel in the middle of this recap, but I can't rule out that was on Andy's mind. It's certainly been on mine, and it's hard.
Let's do what we always do, make an awkward transition to something more fun. Commercials. It was an interesting mix of commercials as usual. I liked how the Wayne's World Uber Eats commercial was just like a Wayne's World bit on Saturday Night Live. There was great potential, and it just fell flat.
Oh gosh, yeah, that one was just to me. I mean, cool. Cardi B was in it. They hit on every popular social media trend going on, considering where we are in the world with this pandemic going on. And, they did some TikTok stuff, and, it was cute in that regard, but overall, meh.
I will tell you the commercials that hit in my household were the Tracy Morgan Rocket Mortgage commercials. I think they come in peace.
I think versus certainty. Yeah. Those are solid.
Those are pretty good. I also liked Flat McConaughey and the 3D Doritos. Yeah. That wasn't bad. That
one messed with me. Initially, I was like, "Wait, who is this?" And until they said Matt, I didn't realize it was McConaughey because it was just so weird. And I get the art style making him as flat as a regular Dorito chip, and then puffing out to 3D to promote their new chip. I guess it was okay. It just missed the mark with me. I had no reaction to it whatsoever.
I find E-Trade usually does a good job during the Super Bowl, and I think they hit again with the little kid trying to work out and build muscles. That one was pretty good. But yeah, overall interesting. I thought the weekend did a good job. I thought, I don't know if it was the best. Actually, I would say I know it's not the best.
It's not the best
Super Bowl halftime, but it wasn't the worst either. It was a
solid performance.
Let's try and bring that back to the game, because after halftime, the Chiefs were just falling all over themselves on the field there. Nick, was that the weekend's fault, or was that
come on now,
bad cleats?
Up until this point, I have never heard of the artist known as The Weeknd. So
Really?
At 33 years old, maybe I'm too old to know what's going on.
33. He's right in your wheelhouse, man.
At 21-9, I was not in the best mind frame to properly appreciate a halftime show. But I did think he did a decent job that seemed entertaining while I was wallowing in pain.
It goes away. Trust me. I mean, at least you're not a bitter New England fan watching the two traitors. And I suppose you could count the other one as a half traitor too. There, the Antonio Brown half traitor.
Really, half traitor
taking a Super Bowl away from the great.
You really could have just paid the guys. They wouldn't be traitors if you would have just paid them.
Well, Brady was offered a contract. It was just one that he didn't like. So that's
right. That is not paying the guy.
I mean, as I'm watching NFL Network in the background, LeBron James tweeting, "If you know, you know, GOAT talk." I mean, is there any doubt anymore? I
want to throw this out because I was having a conversation earlier today about this game, and someone was trying to make the case that Brady is an underdog in this game, and I'm trying to figure out how, because it doesn't even make sense with the amount of talent he had around him. And I made the retort that this Buccaneers team from top to bottom has more talent on it than almost any New England team he's had.
Except for 07.
Was that the perfect season?
Yes, and it was perfect. There was no Super Bowl that year.
So with the exception of 07, top to bottom, this is the best team he's ever played on, talent-wise, top to bottom.
Yeah, I would have to say talent-wise. There's no doubt. But I do think it's interesting that the two most talented receivers on the team in Evans and Godwin were basically the ones that got neutralized. And, there was someone on this podcast who said it was going to be a Gronk game. And there's another one who mentioned Leonard Fournette, the guy who likes to hand out recipes every week. Again, it's very strange how this Buccaneers team came together. And, I would say they did what the Rams couldn't get done. They are the all-star team that actually got the job done.
Which is funny because Sue was on that Rams team too.
By the way, I straight up made Doc's Andy Reid Mo Betta beef and cheddar sandwiches today ahead of the game, and they were freaking delicious. It was amazing. It was a fair amount of work, but they were so good, and we're gonna have a lot of leftovers for the whole week.
Oh God, I've got wings, I got pizza, I've got nachos, I've got food for days, which is hard when you're on a diet because I can't eat any of that food during the week. It's not until cheat day next weekend. It's gonna be tough, but I'll have to wait.
I'm glad I was solo.
Anything else we're missing here?
No, I think we pretty much got it all. Brady got the MVP award. So
how many is that now for him?
5.
Good Lord. Give that MVP to Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles is the person who deserves that. And I almost feel bad that we never mentioned his name when talking about the
coaching carousel. Yeah,
coaches that have missed their shot unjustly. Because I mean, man, he was saddled with such crap
in New York.
with the New York Jets.
I keep trying to convince Pod of that, but
it's got too much of that Jet stink on him.
He still made that team as respectable as it possibly could have been. And I mean, maybe it's good for him that he was released from there, but Todd Bowles deserves another shot as well.
Absolutely.
He knows how to put together a winning team, and he put a cap on the offense that no other team in the NFL managed to restrain in the biggest spot. So add that to his, in his cap of his resume.
And Nick, when we talked about this after you departed on the preview show about Arian's staff being the most diverse staff in the league. All of his coordinators are African-American, offense, defense, and special teams. He has 2 women on his staff, D-line coach and a strength coach. Solely looking at Bowles and Leftwich those guys have to be at the top of the list going into the next season for any vacancies that become available.
Absolutely. I mean, and I almost feel bad that Bieniemy was the central point of the discussion. I feel like in a lot of the media discussion, because there's so many other candidates that are absolutely qualified and should be in the running, and a lot of them on the Buck staff. And I really hope that this puts a spotlight on them.
We can't hire Bieniemy now. I mean, he couldn't even generate a touchdown in the Super Bowl. I mean,
there you go. Maybe we'll have him for 4 more years.
And you know what, Pod? You say that tongue in cheek. Unfortunately, there will be some general managers out there who look at this game and pretty much put it as an indictment on him being a head coach, going forward. And we'll use that to say, well, he couldn't get his offense to score a touchdown in the Super Bowl, so we can't hire him. Completely ignoring everything else up until this point, like it didn't happen or it didn't matter, and again, people are going to say, well, you're playing a race car. I can't help that, but put that out there, because in any other situation, coordinators, whether they, choke in the Super Bowl or not. I mean, hell, look at the Atlanta Falcons, who blew a 25-point lead and their OC gets the head coaching job in Frisco, for not being able to put up more points than he did so that the Patriots comeback wouldn't have sent the game into overtime. His offense completely failed at 35-10 or 28-10, whatever it was at that point. So
it's 28-3.
Yeah, whatever it was. His offense failed. They went into overtime tied at 28, which shouldn't have happened. And then they lose 34-28. He still gets a head coaching job, and now and yet some ownership group or front office group is going to use this game as the indictment as to why Bieniemy doesn't get hired. That's crap to me.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, we talked about Bieniemy enough on the Thursday show. I think, he's a guy that's going to be around. But again, for Nick, it's that bittersweet taste of, well, he didn't get the head coaching job, but at least he's still here. I can imagine every Kansas City Chiefs fan was like, it sucks that he didn't get a job, but thank God he's still my coach. Am I speaking out of turn, Nick?
No, I mean, we're happy to have him. But I mean, yeah, I think and honestly, I do think he's the best OC out of those 3 that we've had. Out of Nagy, Peterson. And Bieniemy. So, I mean, we'll see. But yeah, for now we have him. And that's great.
You won't have him after next year. There's too many. The players have made, the whole pregame was all about Bieniemy and the job that he's done. The players are behind him. He's got too many voices behind him now. But the question will be, what opening is going to be open for him? which we'll find out at some point next season. For now, he'll just have to wallow a little bit in his sorrows as he lost the Super Bowl 31-9.
We did.
Let's see. Yeah, that's about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, not to take over for you, James, but just throw a few business notes out there. This is your instant reaction to the Super Bowl. We hope that you've enjoyed the 2020 season. We've enjoyed presenting it to you, and we will be enjoying presenting you more NFL talk going into I believe we are going to go into our 7th season.
Sweet.
I think we just finished our 6th. We're going into our 7th season of coverage here on Next Fan Up, and we have a lot of exciting things planned, a lot of things coming. We will be off almost 2 weeks, which is nice. We finally get a little bit of a breather here. But this will be our last podcast for 2 weeks, and then we'll be back with our first off-season podcast, not this coming Thursday, but the Thursday following, which I don't have a calendar in front of me. Otherwise, I'd tell you the exact date. But we'll be back, and I think we have a lot of interesting things coming up. You know, my son's been playing with a mock draft simulator online from one of the, I think it's Pro Football Reference or one of those sites. And he's had some very interesting mock drafts, I have to say. And I think, I think I just might have him do some random mock drafts, and we'll present those as like a quick little segment on the show. I know people hear me say quick segment and they go, oh, that's going to be 4 hours long. But no. We're gonna try and change some things up, and we want to hear from you. nextfanup@gmail.com, at NFU Podcast on Twitter, Facebook.com/NFU Podcast. Reach out, let us know what you want to hear, and we'll talk about it, because that's what we do. We are sports fans that like to talk about sports, and specifically the NFL. You guys have any final words?
I'm going to be sick for about 3 days.
Once again, at least you're not a bitter New England fan that has to deal with this. It's terrible.
But now I have to put Tom Brady in the same breath as Otto Graham. And you know how much I revere Otto Graham.
Yes, I do. And both of us have no right, because at least you're not a smug Chiefs fan having to deal with this. Oh, before we go out and I give you the figurative deuces, what did you feel? How did you feel about the actual deuces that were given to Tyreek Hill this evening in an unsportsmanlike way?
Well, I'm not sure. That's a pretty light unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. But given the way that the overall game was officiated, it seemed like kind of an evening out overall. But no, Scotty Miller, you are not as fast as Tyreek Hill.
Scotty Miller didn't even touch the field tonight.
No, he did. He had negative 0.3 fantasy points. He had a 3-yard loss. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I must have missed that one.
Yeah, well,
I never saw him out there.
I didn't. He prevented me from winning even like pennies in DFS. Yes. And unfortunately, of all of the Super Bowl previews that I saw, no one had the Buccaneers blowing out the Kansas City Chiefs. And
no.
Because of that, the over didn't come in, which was also very disappointing.
I told you the over wasn't going to happen.
It should have happened. Kansas City just couldn't score touchdowns.
Hey, man, look, there's always something weird about these games, especially rematches. Like the first game was 27-24. I didn't see that happening this time around.
All right, well, I'm going to go leave to my own personal palace of pain. Have a good night, gentlemen.
We're all going good night. Deuces to everyone. Here's Kofi Annan. There you have it.
Dear friends and colleagues, saying goodbye is never easy. I believe we can all feel proud of what we have done together. And through it all, you have maintained your professionalism and commitment and remained true to the spirit of the Charter. That principle.
We go out, we hit people in the mouth.